First and foremost, welcome. I'm Neil Williamson with the Free Enterprise Forum, sharing moderating duties today with Steve Rappaport from NBC 29. This is the laundry list part of the program. Restrooms are out this way, and fire exits are here. In the unlikely event of a water landing, no, wrong script. Audience questions will be taken via the National Press Club model. That model has index cards in the back, and there are some pens back there. If you have a question, going back, write it down and place it in the basket up front. Those questions, we aren't going to get to all of them, I guarantee, but those questions will go to all of the candidates in the third portion of our program. First portion will be opening statements. Then we're going to go into moderator questions. Each candidate will have a moderator question. Then we go into the audience questions, and we follow up with candidates. Each candidate will have the opportunity to ask one candidate on the stage a question, and then we close with closing statements. I want to take this opportunity to thank the Hillsdale Conference Center. This facility is available to the public for rent for social events, and they have a great team led by Mr. Brent Woodyard. I also want to thank our technical director tonight, Lauren Graff, and our timekeeper, Sean Pendleton. Thank you very much for being here. Now, without further ado, on to opening statement. Candidate speaking order was determined by a random draw earlier today and will rotate throughout the event. Each candidate will have up to 2 minutes for their opening statement, and we'll be keeping time. First up is Mr. Mike Pruitt.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mike Pruitt, and I'm running for the Albemarle County Board of Supervisors to represent the Scottsville District, tragically unopposed. I want to begin by thanking Neil, the Free Enterprise Forum, and NBC for helping put on this event today. So I grew up in South Carolina, and it was a place I really loved, but it wasn't a place I knew that I was going to be able to stay. It wasn't a community that had a lot of opportunity, and it was a place that, frankly, as a queer man, I didn't always feel very welcome. I've been meditating as I've been, running for this office a lot on what it means to have a home. And, I then ping-ponged across the United States in the United States Navy for 8 years, did a lot of work I'm incredibly proud of, did 2 combat deployments. But every place I lived wasn't a home, it was an assignment. When I moved here to Albemarle to retrain as a civil rights attorney, this was the first opportunity I had to actually build the kind of roots in a community that I cared about and wanted to stay. And what I've increasingly become worried is that that is not an opportunity that is afforded to everyone. Not everyone who grows up and comes of age in our community anymore is still able to afford to stay here. And not everyone who works here has the opportunity to make this their own home. It's instead a passing assignment. I see that as fundamentally wrong. I think we need to try and build a community where bus drivers and nurses and our school teachers, police officers, everyone who wants to stay here, who thinks of this as their home, can remain. I want to make sure that Albemarle is a place that people think of as their home and that they can come home to. And that's really what's animated my campaign, and that's the community I really hope to bring. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up is the incumbent from the Ravenna District, the LaPisto-Kirtley.
Thank you very much, Neil and Steve, and you all for coming out here tonight. I really appreciate it. My journey started in Virginia, where I was born. Military family, we lived all over, and my dad retired in California. That's where I spent my formative years, met my husband at the university, Cal State University, Los Angeles. And that's what started my journey. I started teaching. I was a teacher. I was a principal. I was a director in charge of 24 elementary schools when I retired. In fact, my boss is sitting right over here, Richard Alonzo, was the local district superintendent, and they moved here after we did. But I'm proud to say that my life has been one of public service. My husband was in law enforcement for 34 years. His life was one of public service. I also served on my city council for 20 years and on the planning commission for 4 years prior to that. and was the president of different organizations that included fire, police, transportation, and air quality. So that's what I like to do. That's what I enjoy, and that's what I will continue to do. And I am running for re-election for the Rivanna district. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Now we'll hear from the incumbent Whitehall District Supervisor, Ann Mallek.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you to our organizers for bringing us together here tonight. I wish my opponent were here because I and others would be interested in hearing his views. What does being a supervisor mean to me? My commitment to serve local government and respect for constituents began long before I ran for office. Over 20 years, I was one of the usual suspects in the audience with Neil, listening and learning, studying about process and getting expertise. Prior to being elected, I studied, spoke at board meetings, and advocated about issues. I had a record. But it's not just about showing up and at meetings and deciding things. There's lots of work beforehand, reading minutes, reading packets, asking questions, spending much more time preparing than we spend in the meetings, just like school teachers who spend more time preparing their lessons than they do actually delivering them. I also serve on local committees and state and federal committees because that helps me to do a better job and to bring home expertise to Albemarle County. To do this job well, one must be all in, and I am. What does that mean? I'm available. I connect people to the county staff who can find solutions and answer their technical questions. Answer the phone, evenings and weekends, in the grocery store, in the feed store. People work and have questions that impact their lives and their success, and they need to be able to reach me in the evenings. I meet with residents in person, as well as do site visits with staff and agency personnel, such as with DEQ and VDOT. I'm accessible at all hours. I seek answers, find the truth, and learn what can be done. I'm experienced. I've built connections with all levels of government to get answers and results for Albemarle County. I'm reliable. I have a record of comments, presentations, and voting. To achieve improvement, we must understand how things get done. Thank you all for coming. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. And finally, for our opening statement, TJ Fadeley.
So good evening, everyone. I want to first thank Neil and the Free Enterprise Forum, along with Steve and NBC 29 for putting this together tonight. So my name is TJ Fadeley, and I'm an independent candidate running for the Rivanna District Supervisor seat. A lot of people have asked me why I'm running, and so the answer is to give Rivanna residents an alternative to increase in taxation and ever-growing government, to put the brakes on the excessive spending and to encourage a more efficient government, to work at reducing costly and unfruitful government growth and programs that show no return on investment, while finding savings to reduce the burden on residents who are struggling because of these increases, on top of the recent inflation. I want to bring a more transparent and meaningful representation back to our county board, to be the eyes and ears in the county meeting, to advocate on behalf of taxpayers. I've been in the county for over 26 years, and I'm sincerely invested in supporting ideas to help make Albemarle affordable and more accessible to everyone. As a husband and a father and a local business owner, I understand and feel the impact of the built-in cost of government. This is why I want to work on reducing our shared burden and to make transparency in the decisions by our Board of Supervisors non-negotiable. Thank you.
All right, we're going to start our questions now, and the first one goes to Rivanna Supervisor LaPisto-Kirtley and focuses on infrastructure. It's kind of multi-parted. How would you grade the county's public infrastructure in general, transportation, safety, schools, parks? And if elected, what specific infrastructure project would you push to have completed during your time in office?
Thank you very much for that question. I think our transportation needs to be greatly improved. We are working on it. We have come up with novel ideas, but remember, we are 726 square miles. That's how large we are. To provide a fixed transit bus route takes, like going up 29 North, That takes a lot of people. Our population is spread out so far that it's difficult to get transportation to everybody. We've actually come out with what's called MicroCat that will help. It's a pilot program that is a grant that we received and will allow people from Pantops and 29 North to be able to be picked up from their home in a Sienna van and then taken to that location. It's going to be free for the first year. But that gives us an opportunity for those people living in Pantops, living in 29 North, to be able to go places. So if you're in Pantops, you can go up to Target, you can go to Walmart, shopping, come back, etc. That's a big plus in our area. We're looking forward to that, implementing that. Otherwise, if you want to go to, let's say, UVA Hospital, then the MicroCat would take you from that location, from your location, to a fixed bus route, bus stop. So you're able to do that. As far as our infrastructure, when I first came on board 4 years ago, our computer system was 20 years old. Now, those of you that are younger realize you're probably in a state of shock, because if anything is 2 weeks old, then you have a heart attack. 20 years old, our computer system. Our systems didn't even speak to each other. We've modernized that. What we're doing is we're not deferring things anymore. We're taking the step to make sure that we modernize our infrastructure. Our reservoirs maintenance have to be improved. We're doing that. We're making sure that the pipes, the reservoirs to the pipes are going from Sugar Hollow to Ragged Mountain to improve our water system. As far as our Parks and Rec, I think we're doing very well because of the fact that we implemented Biscuit Run. We're opening that, and also Free Bridge Lane. We're connecting that to Darden Town. It's never been done here before, where you close down a small street where nobody lives in the center section, and you're attaching it to a park so people can walk, ride, and enjoy the river without having to be being hit by a car. Our county roads have millions, or VDOT spends millions of dollars in our county roads every year. And I think my time is up now, but overall, I think we're doing pretty good.
Thank you. I forgot to mention for this section, there's 3 minutes for the answer. But we do have Sean on the clock, as they say. Our next question, second moderator question, goes to Supervisor Ann Mallek and focuses on economic development. Earlier this summer, we learned that Pro Renata Brewery, after unsuccessfully pursuing an expansion of its Crozet facility, is relocating 80% of its production to a new brewery pub facility in Stanton. Should Albemarle have done more to keep these jobs locally? And what are we doing as a locality to support existing businesses?
Very much for that question. Pro Renata is set up as a farm brewery, and it is set up in the rural area in order to qualify for the state rules, state law regarding farm brewery operations. Doing that, it does not have access to sewer and water because of the location that the owners chose. They've certainly been very, very successful in that location, but we're not able to secure being able to be added to the public sewer system because the land is outside the jurisdictional area, as is all the other property along the south side of 250 at the edge of the growth area there. It is certainly the economic development plan, Project Enable, does focus upon supporting our existing businesses and enabling them to succeed. And I think in many ways, the county did do that very much by encouraging the expansion and also making the proper arrangements for the parking lots and that kind of thing. But the county was not able to meet the request that the owner had to provide the sewer for that. So that, I think, is why he moved some of his major production effort over the hill. But I know they're going to stay in Crozet for their smaller parts of their batch brewing and then their tasting room. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Steve? All right, excuse me. TJ Fadeley, the candidate in the Rivanna district, gets the next question on fiscal management. Since 2002, adjusted for inflation, the county's operating budget has increased 56%, while its population has increased 33%, excuse me, and school population about 12%. How do you explain the differential between spending and population growth? What's your opinion of the current spending patterns and what would you change?
So thank you for that question, Steve. So a few parts of the budget as I've been looking it over that really popped out to me, to where the spending is extremely out of proportion to population served is over the last 3 years, you've had a 445% increase for strategic planning and performance, which in my accounts would be just shy of $30 million. To where asking most county residents, you do not hear much of the benefit on where they're feeling any return on that investment. On top of another area that popped out was the increase in human resources. I think it was about a 12 personnel increase or about 107% increase from the fiscal year budget of 2021. On top of a 64% increase for communications and public engagement, to where a majority of the residents I speak to are still not in the know any more than they were back in 2021 as to how the county is planning to use their resources. So as I was looking over a book written by John Nordquist, The Wealth of Cities, one of the things he mentions in there is looking for ways to outsource to local businesses to where we can return revenues back to local businesses, which would, in result, save overhead and operational expense for county operations. On top of, I would look to try to reduce some of the spending on ineffective pet projects that, again, just don't seem to bring any return on investment for the average county resident.
Thank you. The final moderator question is for Mike Pruitt. Albemarle's current comprehensive plan and zoning code discourage even small-scale commercial activity in the rural areas that make up more than 95% of the land mass of the county. This results in rural residents having to drive further to get the basics, bread, milk, eggs, as well as services, auto mechanic, doctor, dentist. Do you endorse this policy or would you work to relax such restrictions, sorry?
I think there's two things that you frequently, I would say almost ubiquitously hear when you speak with folks who live in the rural communities. And that's one, for the love of God, keep the rural communities rural. And number two is, I really wish I didn't have to drive so far to get to the grocery store, which is a little hard because those are often mutually exclusive. I think the county is doing a really good effort at trying to really cut the difference here through some smart planning. I'm very optimistic at what we can do with our future crossroads plan and how we can actually better leverage some of our existing identified development areas and also, frankly, improve civilians' access to transit opportunities that will actually help, if not realistically make them physically closer to these kinds of amenities, and make that distance feel a little smaller. I'm very excited about the possible future of a regional transit authority helping actually bridge some of that gap that we're seeing. I feel like if a Scottsville resident had a reliable commuter line into the city, well, boy, howdy, they would certainly feel a lot less frustrated by how often lousy the selection they have at the One Food line might be. These kinds of expenses, these kinds of investments truly expand the opportunities that are available in our community. So I think if we focus on what tools we do have in our toolkit, we'll find that we don't need to chew up more of the rural territory and bulldoze any more trees to be able to get the kind of services that people need and deserve. Thank you. That was good.
All right, we'll now move to audience questions. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for these questions, and everyone will get a chance to respond. We're going to start with Ms. Mallek on the first one here. Whereas Albemarle has dissolved its share in K-Tech, what would you do to reinstate vocational training? And since every adjoining county has vocational agriculture and an FAA program. Why doesn't Albemarle, and should we?
Yes, to the should we. No question about it. Albemarle is behind what I have seen with my own eyes in Fluvanna and Green and Culpeper for sure, where they have new CTE programming and often is associated with the community college in certainly in with Germanna and Culpeper. I tried to get the actual Environmental Sciences Academy to be interested in having an agriculture line, and perhaps it will come sometime in the future, but it has not come there yet. Technical career education is incredibly important. I've seen this from the adult side. For the last 16 years, I've been working with the Workforce Center, Piedmont Workforce Network, who provides job training for people who are changing jobs, are dislocated workers when their factory closes, or are adults who would like to change their job and get a new career, a new step up the ladder. The Innovation Campus on Glenwood Station provides all the different state agencies who work together to provide training for all these people. It is very disappointing that things have gone the way they have. I think we're in the middle of the process for how it's going to develop at the high school level. But the local one-stop center has set up liaison with each of the local school divisions and actually will be providing career and technical, especially apprenticeship and internship teaching for the local schools so that the schools will not have to be standing up their own programs. And I think that kind of efficiency and cost sharing will be helpful for the schools and also will be helpful to the students to have training in many of the target industry and high demand jobs that the state has offered. There's always, there we go. Thank you very much.
All right, same question for TJ.
Thank you, Steve. So I too agree. I was very disheartened to hear that K-Tech had lost their portion of the county's sponsorship. Being that there are a multitude of people that I've spoken with that are struggling with student loan debt from their 4-year degrees, coming home and not having any job to support the amount of money that they spent for the education that they received. I would strongly encourage, at 41 years old, it was always offered to us to have something like shop class or something along the trades or fields, which nowadays technology would be an extremely important thing to offer to our young kids who might not have the opportunity for a 4-year school. What that does is it allows these young people to come out of school with the skills necessary to be marketable for what everybody, and myself as a small business owner. One thing I've been struggling with for the last couple of years is finding qualified help. That would instantly put people into the job market with marketable skills coming directly out of high school and not sending them out into the world to be encumbered by loads of debt to pay on for the next 15 years while trying to establish a foothold in our community. So I would strongly support any program for our county to re-engage and make sure that our young up-and-comers have the opportunity for these programs to be existing. Thank you.
Okay, Mike. Yeah.
Outstanding. I really want to talk about this one. Yes, so I think the path to careers for so many working class families is going to be through technical and trade education. This has to be something that we invest in immensely. I agree with Supervisor Mallek that we should be investing in expanding agricultural opportunities. And something I want to touch on, because I haven't heard it from other folks, is I think we need to make sure that we're actually getting the steady supply of people who are going to fill those seats in our education facilities. We actually already have a pretty outstanding technical education program here in the county. We have PVCC, we have K-Tech, because we can still attend K-Tech even if we lost our portion for now. And we have Center 1 and newly developed Center 2, which are all providing extraordinary opportunities. What we need to do is actually make sure that those people are getting in seats. And to do that, we need to show them that it works. We need to actually be working to make sure that people are provided with meaningful career opportunities that allow them to stay here, that they can actually then leverage the skills they're developing. I think that means we need to make sure that we're doing whatever we can as a county to make sure that those forms of education are actually being realized into meaningful careers. That means working with the employers in the private sector to provide the incentives they need to actually build out meaningful career pathways to make sure that this is actually a route of choice, not of a last opportunity when they're looking at how to fill their ranks. I think we should be looking at our own role. You know, the county is an employer of thousands of people in this community. Do we have existing apprenticeship programs to fill our, technical maintenance in our facilities? To my knowledge, we don't. And I think that's a missed opportunity. I think we can lean on a lot of existing levers to try and streamline the pathways for kids who are coming out of technical education into these kind of fulfilling careers. And I think with increased investment in technical education, I think you're going to see a really thriving and robust working class. And something I do want to touch on, even though it feels a little out of lane, is we see you know what, maybe I shouldn't touch on it.
Something for me, will you? I definitely, a point of clarification regarding K-Tech. We tried to take over or buy K-Tech. The city of Charlottesville was, because how the contract was written up, or they were able to buy us out. That doesn't mean that our students won't be going to K-Tech. Our students will be going to K-Tech. We are in the process of negotiating terms with Charlottesville so our students can continue going to K-Tech. So that's not going to stop. As far as the FFA bringing that type of agricultural program into K-Tech, I'm all for it. I think that's good. We have a lot of agricultural land. We have a lot of farmers. If you've seen the beautiful farms that we have in Albemarle, which a lot of developed cities areas do not have, it's important for us to keep our agricultural, what happens agriculturally, continuing. That is extremely important. So yes, I would be in favor of having that come into K-Tech or into the high schools. Our students should be given that opportunity. We don't know what affects each child, what area that they want to go into, what area they want to study. We need to provide opportunity in all areas. Some people don't want to go to college. They want to learn a trade. They just want to get a job. We need to be mindful of that and make sure that they're successful also. As far as others going on to college, we need to make sure that we provide high-paying jobs in qualified areas. And we're doing that. We are in the process of doing that. Our high school centers are technically have a technical bias. That's okay, because we can still add to that. So that's what we want to do. Thank you. Well, that's what I'd be in favor of.
Thank you. In preparing for this event, I knew we were going to have some questions that focused around Albemarle County's educational system. Didn't think it was going to be K-Tech. But another somewhat educational question that cuts to the core of many of the issues that the community's been seeing. And this question will go first to TJ Fadeley. As a supervisor, what is / should be your relationship with the school board?
Well, as a supervisor, they're the ones who hold the purse strings for the 57% of the county's budget that is administered to our local school system. So I think the supervisor should definitely have a say in the persuasion of how that money is being spent on behalf of the taxpayers who are pulling it out of their pockets to support these institutions. As a parent of 2 children currently in Albemarle county schools. And as a graduate of Albemarle County Schools, when they were one of the most remarkable school systems in the state, one thing would be I would like to see a little bit more push for the academic rigor that when I moved up here from Texas and I got into Albemarle, it was a completely different ball game from what I was used to at the school and the level down there. Being that we are in a college town, the academic rigor was unparalleled. I think we've kind of gotten away from that. You know, I am all for supporting children's emotional structures and encouraging strong households, but for public education, those education institutions really need to focus on making sure our students are ready for the real world as they exit and go out to seek jobs. Again, they need to be prepared to be marketable for the careers and occupations that they're choosing in the future, which, as somebody who deals with the public on a daily basis, I think our youth are being failed by the systems that we support and are producing people who are not adequately able to handle the real world.
Thank you. Mike, as a supervisor, what is or should be your relationship with the elected school board?
I agree with Mr. Fadeley. I think it's important that we have a really robust and positive working relationship. At the end of the day, they're going to come to us with a budget, and it's going to be on us to approve or deny that. We only get that final line vote on their total budget. That means if we want to be able to actually influence and shape, hey, we are only going to be able to commit X many dollars this year. We need to have that positive relationship so we can actually collectively identify priorities and make sure it's not a zero-sum game where negotiations are strained. So I've been making a very serious effort at building those relationships with folks on the school board. I also think it's important to remember that we have on the Board of Supervisors a lot of other very important roles that we have. It's not just the annual budget, though, that's really critical. We also are the people who are tasked with making sure that our teachers and our bus drivers can afford to live in this community. You're going to have a hard time filling that existing bus driver gap that we know, because we see it on the news every day, we hear it from our communities every day, exists if those bus drivers are going to continue to have to drive up from Buckingham in order to be able to get to work. That is a critical role that we have, making sure that these folks can live here. We also have an incredibly important role in finalizing and drafting the capital improvement plan. I agree with Mr. Fadeley. I think we are failing our students and our schools right now. I drive by Mountain View every single day, and I see people learning in trailers. But the truth is, Mr. Fadeley's own proposals would make sure that's going to be the same case for decades. If we try and take a step back on our tax rates, then there is no way around it. There's no amount of budget slashing you can do, Mr. Fadeley, that is going to keep you from running up against that 10% investment limit we have in the Constitution that's going to prevent us from actually executing that capital improvement plan. It will condemn people in my district, at least, to at least a decade more of learning in trailers. So yeah, I do think we need to have a positive role, and we need to make sure we understand our own responsibilities in this world.
Thank you. Supervisor LaPisto-Kirtley.
Thank you very much. Our school board is an elected body. They are on their own in reality. You elect the school board, and we provide the funds. That is correct. We provide the funds, and that's basically our limitation. However, we do have meetings. We do get together with the school board. We have joint meetings. We know what they're thinking. They know what we're thinking. We also get monthly reports from the school board. We get weekly notices from the superintendent. On a personal level, we maintain personal contact with school board members all the time. So we're there not in an official capacity to tell them how to do their job, but we're there as to assist them what they want to do. So whatever they want to implement, we're there supporting them. And I'm getting back to the bus driver issue. I think also respect, treating people with respect is how you also are able to hold on to people. You pay them more. We have to pay more, which could, which means that all of our dollars are well spent. If you don't pay people, you're not going to get the people you need to run the county. Also, respect is a huge part of that. But that's the way I feel that our relationship with the school board is. Thank you.
Supervisor Mallek.
Thank you. I am also a graduate of Albemarle High School, although a long time ago, beyond where Mr. Fadeley is. I've also had the good fortune as an outreach educator for the Virginia Museum of Natural History to have done wildlife programming in all of our elementary schools over 15 years. And it was a wonderful experience to see the joy in those children's eyes and to hear their excited questions about the world. It was a real honor to do that. I think that everyone has already stated that the board raises the funds and transfers funds by category, instruction versus administration, et cetera, to the school board for their implementation and decision. But I have been quite pleased over the last 5 years to see much better relationship with strategic planning, talking about their priorities, because it is up to the school board to prioritize which of the capital budgets needs to come first. 10 years ago, there were additions to Western Albemarle that were planned, but those were changed to other priorities because the school board's priorities changed. And they are the ones who are the closest to the issues and need to have those kinds of decisions on their plate. But I look forward to further discussions for this upcoming budget. And I hope that the current 3 schools that are under construction will provide really great facilities for the children going forward. Thank you.
Okay, another audience question. And on this one, we'll start with Supervisor, with Mr. Pruitt, candidate Pruitt. How do you feel about ranked choice voting? Is that something you support, don't support, and explain?
Yeah, I love ranked choice voting. I'm very excited to implement it in the course of my term. We touched on it very briefly at the beginning, but let's, address the elephant in the room. I'm not running against anyone. I'm not entirely sure if I believe the common myth that Scottsville is a conservative district. It's not. We consistently lead Democrat leaning, but we are one of the most conservative districts, and it should be a point of community embarrassment that we cannot actually field full slates and competitive elections here. I believe that at least one way we can work together to solve this is to try and make elections more accessible, to try and make the single dominance of parties less spooky, less of a barrier to people. I think that it's important that we have ranked choice voting because it also makes it so that the kinds of people who can run for election are going to be more diverse. If you have, it helps cut down on backroom deal making. If you have 2 people within the same party, that's something where it's almost impossible to sometimes oust long-term incumbents, even when they no longer reflect the needs of their own community, because it's impossible to ever run against someone in a same party primary without having previously negotiated that thing behind the scenes. This is all messy. It's all undemocratic. I do believe that we should move toward ranked choice voting. And I do believe we should also do so deliberately and seriously. Something we've seen in one of the first localities that did transition to ranked choice voting, Arlington in Virginia, is that they did, frankly, I won't say a bad job, they did no job educating voters as to how that was actually supposed to work, which was embarrassing. We can do better and we should do better. We should make sure our citizens actually understand what they're doing when they go to the polls and how this new system is going to work and how it's going to expand their own choices of representatives.
Thank you. We'll just kind of work our way down the table here.
Hello. Thank you very much for that question. I'm also in favor of ranked choice voting. I do think, however, that we need to go slowly because it takes a lot of explaining. So I think if you don't know about it, that's a big thing. I think that's the way the county is moving, in that we need to educate. We need to take at least a year, maybe less, maybe longer, but to educate the populace. They cannot go into this without understanding ranked choice voting. It's too easy for someone to say it doesn't work, this is bad, blah, blah, blah. We need to make sure that people are educated. That's the big thing regarding ranked choice voting. And as someone who's been through a primary, we didn't have, and last time, and a general election last time, there was no deal making. So I'm not quite sure where you're coming from there.
Talking crowded.
Crowded prominent. Okay, 4 folks. Okay, fine. Well, okay. But I would be in favor of that. But like I said, we need to make sure that the entire community, everyone who votes, understands ranked choice voting. Then we make a decision based upon that. I think once people understand ranked choice voting, they're going to love it. If they don't understand it, it's not going to go well. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I was fortunate to be able to participate in a presentation on ranked choice voting at the Crozet Library last Saturday. And our group of 25 people did survive the cookie ranked choice voting completely successfully. I think it was Chips Ahoy or something like that. Not my choice. But anyway, it showed in a wonderfully humorous and yet comprehensible way how the process worked. And so from that experience, I'm optimistic. I do think that I look forward to more presentations before the Board of Supervisors and an extensive public education process with discussions and hopefully more public fora where people can also participate in the same way that I did. We are currently authorized to use it for local races only, not for constitutional officers, even our local constitutional officers. So that means the next time that could come up would be in 2 years from now as the soonest. And I hope that during the next few months, we will be able to come to a decision about whether to go forward or not. And then that would give that father next year to be able to bring a program into fruition before the spring primaries might happen for 2024, 5, 6. What's the matter with me? Yes, next time, 2 years. Anyway, that's just one example of how confusing it could get if you're not paying attention. But anyway, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to learning more, and I think more and more of the state former barriers have been smoothed out so that the machinery and the funding and the technical things have been answered. Thank you.
So again, thank you for the question. I don't know a lot about ranked choice voting. Of course, as I've delved into this campaign, I've tried to make myself familiar with a lot of these topics that are coming up. To kind of push back to what Mike was saying, you know, the ranked choice voting to me looks like just another way of making backdoor deals with the way that I was explained with the exhausting. So I don't necessarily think I would be in favor of it. Now, they did vote to make it for local elections, which 2 people running a simple majority rule is all you really need in that. It gives less opportunity for, again, sleight of hand. It reminds me of a little bit like a magic trick on how the exhausting of the ballot works. And then to push back on the Arlington, if I'm correct, they did just make it for the recent public elections, but I believe they're changing course on that from an article I read due to the nature of how that panned out, which I'm guessing it didn't work out in the people's favor who were really pushing for it. So they didn't like the way it shook out in that retrospect. So I would have to say I don't know enough about it, but from what I do know about it, I would be opposed to it at this moment in time.
Thank you. Next audience question, I'm going to add a little bit of context to, which is always dangerous. Albemarle County's wireless communication ordinance is functionally about 20 years old. And a few things have changed in wireless since 20 years old. I'll leave my flip phone in my pocket. While no one wants to see a cell tower in their backyard, what are your thoughts regarding cell tower location and the height? And this question goes to B first.
Thank you. And I I thought you had a rotary phone. Sorry, maybe I made a mistake. Yes. So cell phone towers, this is something that the community gets really riled up about. And I will tell you, everybody wants cell phone service. Nobody wants a cell phone tower in their area where they can see it. I'm finding that constantly talking to people and such. Our cell phone tower hasn't been updated in 20 years. And we all know that things have changed. So the height of the cell phone towers is predicated on the fact how much distance do you want. So right now our rule is 10 feet above tree height. But that doesn't, depending on how many trees, we all know that Albemarle County has a lot of trees everywhere. And so that doesn't get you a distance far enough. So we're looking at cell phone towers that are higher, 195 feet, if you 199 feet even. If you go to 200 feet, you have to have a little red light at the top of the tower for the airplanes. I consider cell phone service a health and safety issue. So I'm very much in favor of cell phone towers. However, I do believe that if we're patient, if we have that now, I think cell phone towers will go away in maybe 10, 15 years, maybe sooner, with new technology. And I bring to you, remember the pay phones that they used to have along the freeways and the interstates to call for emergencies? Where are those now? They're nowhere. So I think with new technology, cell phone towers will be done away with. But in the meantime, it's a health and safety issue, in my opinion, also educational, and for people who work at home. So that is my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Mallek?
Thank you. It is important that we continue and bring to a close the current updating of the wireless program, which has been underway, it seems, for years, and is, I think, wrapping up in the near future, which will give a lot more certainty to what is desired and what is needed. The reference tree is supposed to be the tallest tree in proximity to the location of the tower, in which case that will give the largest possible delivery of signal to the surrounding area. There are many places where cell towers could be built with only a building permit, where they are not skylit, where they are up against a mountainside, as there are several along to the 64 on the northern side of the road, invisible because of their location. There are also many locations where towers have been approved, several along Route 20, 2 at least out in Whitehall Village, which have been approved by the board and yet not constructed because the company who applied for them and received the approval chose not to go forward due to not enough customers in the area. So the major difficulty really is how to meet the financial requirements of the cell phone companies who are choosing or proposing to bring these forward. I understand there are places throughout the Whitehall district where cell phones drop calls, and that is a reality that we will never solve because of the topography. But we also need to rely on the ordinance which we have, because that's what our citizens count on us to do until we have a new ordinance adopted. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fadeley?
So thank you guys for that one. So I did participate in the county's survey for the cell phone towers. And I believe due to the reports that were produced, if they increased, I forget the percentage, but a small percentage of the tower heights in rural areas, it would increase 100% of coverage for where the broadband initiatives have yet to find the build out to rural places, which would help bridge that digital divide for rural areas. I know farmers and agricultural producers would probably be able to greatly use the ability to use modern technology from their sites and the farms that they're using without having to wait for a broadband build out. So I don't think it's too much to ask for slight height increases to a modest amount of towers that would produce 100% of coverage for the county. One of the reasons those companies most likely did not build out the towers that were approved is due to the fact that whenever you promise a customer that you won't be able to reach them with the service that they're looking to buy, then you don't have enough customers to make it lucrative for the business to want to build out a tower that's been approved. So if they have a height requirement, that would allow them to capture the customers necessary. And I'm sure there are plenty of customers in the rural areas which would love the opportunity to be able to use the increasing streaming devices that everybody uses nowadays. People in the country would like to be able to have those conveniences as well, to where I think a modest increase in height would not be a bad thing for the small percentage of towers necessary to make it worth the while.
Mr. Pruitt?
Thank you. I want to start by just agreeing with both B and Mr. Fadeley that this is a health and safety issue, and it's one that's especially critical for residents in the rural community, where they often are going to be especially vulnerable to not having access to critical infrastructure that they need. I am also not going to pretend to be a cell phone tower engineer who knows the exact right height. And I can't say I was at this this hearing that you were at. So I apologize that I don't come with that information. But what I have been at is several board of supervisor meetings where individual tower builds have actually come before for approval. And the thing that I think stands out in this case with the wireless ordinance is really emblematic of a lot of development and zoning procedures that we have in the county, which is we have an identified, the development community knows what best practices in the industry are. They're coming and they're telling us that. And what we're finding is that our ordinances don't reflect that anymore. So just doing what is standard in the industry is falling outside of our development standards. That means every single one of these kinds of bills, whether it's a cell phone tower or whether it's a moderate density development inside our development area, those are having to go through a really onerous buzzsaw of regulation and approval that makes it very financially unfeasible. So yes, I think we have a right to expect that our government can be agile in actually updating these requirements to reflect going business needs. I think we have the right to expect that in our wireless ordinance. I think we have the right to give rural residents basic coverage that they deserve. And I think we have the right to expect that in a wide range of other fields. Thank you.
Thank you. In TV, we love when we get a nice segue. So thank you, Mr. Pruitt. That was perfect. We'll start with Supervisor Mallek here. Over the last 5 years, Albemarle Supervisors has approved new residential projects at 58% of comprehensive plan density. Where do you see new growth happening in denser development areas or in terms of expanding the development areas?
Thank you. One solution to the inability perhaps to fully implement the proposed percentage of density is the lack of infrastructure that has already been provided in the communities who exist right now and for the residents who live here right now. There would be far less pushback about new developments coming in if the people who live there now had a sidewalk on which to push their stroller in order to get to the nearby facilities, or the roads and bridges that which they need in order to get around smoothly. That has to happen to catch up with where we are now with the growth which we have already pursued. And I predict that if those things begin to happen more regularly, there'll be far less concern about bringing new people into more confined spaces. We also have, the county has approved recently some very successfully designed higher density projects that I look forward to hearing come online soon, especially those which are associated with already completed transportation projects and where mass transit is already available. So I don't know that, and I've never understood where that 6 to 36 units per acre ever came from, because it was something out of a textbook, I predict, but it's been around since the early 80s. And there doesn't seem to be any magic to it, except that it was more than we had now. So that number is not written in stone as far as I can tell, but I really think that it's important that we provide infrastructure for our residents in order to be able to be secure in their homes and be able to get around safely. Thank you.
Okay, TJ Fadeley. Yeah, just over the last 5 years, Albemarle Supervisors approved new residential projects at 58% of comprehensive plan density. Where do you see new growth happening in denser development areas or in terms of expanding the development areas?
Okay, so yes, thank you for that question. So as far as expansion of the development area, I believe that should be a part of the conversation. As was mentioned earlier, Biscuit Run Park, which brought about 1,100 acres out of the comp plan. You know, a revision to add back 1,100 acres should be somewhere in there as part of the development or the comp plan. I believe reimagining commercial vacancies with mixed use zoning should be something that should be brought up as well, which is where you can take an area that already has existing infrastructure and create what Mike was speaking of earlier, which I also agree with and would look forward to working with him on, workforce housing and affordable housing. Those would be prime areas to where you could bring that kind of development in place without extreme cost to create those developments, along with the overbearing necessity for the infrastructure build outs that are already existing. Along with that, modernizing frequently waived standards for urban, suburban, and rural areas, crossroad and transitional development areas, I believe should be part of the question as well going forward for the future of Albemarle County.
And then for Mike Pruitt, same question.
So I know I touched on a little bit of this already, but we have in this community places that we have identified that are where we are going to concentrate our development, where we want to have our development, where we want people to live. And very conveniently, that's also where people in this community want to live. They're the places that are near amenities. They're the places that are near where they work. And then we also have a zoning code that makes it extraordinarily hard sometimes to actually build the housing there. Baffling. I think it's really incumbent on the board to try and make it so that we streamline this process so that there is not such an onerous process that anyone who wants to invest the capital in trying to expand either the commercial real estate or the housing properties in this community has to go through. There should not be such a high government cost that is extracted into every single development that we make. We also do, like Mr. Fadeley mentioned, need to make it easier to retrofit and improve gray zone communities. We have a lot of those. You look up 29, there's a lot of unused property that is partially developed. This might also involve county incentive funding. When you look at gray zone development, these are things that often are not as easy to build on as greenfield development because there might be environmental hazards that are unknown. There might be things that have to be gutted. Sometimes that means that the county has to step in. And if we're going to try and build affordable workforce housing, there is going to need to be funding and incentives to help put that forward. I've been very impressed with the funding and incentive process that has been developed so far by the county and the housing office. But I think we need to make sure that that conversation is happening in sync with any changes and improvements and modernizations we might want to put in our zoning process. Lastly, our Office of Community Development recently announced that they were significantly, I think, cutting in half the number of individual types of permits that need to be issued during development. It went down from 300 some odd to 100 some odd, which is still a lot of different kinds of permits. Wouldn't it be great if that wasn't quite so complicated? Thank you.
All right, thanks. Thank you to all of you. We'll now move into the candidate round. Oh, you know what?
Just because I'm the shortest does not mean you can ignore me.
My apologies. My
That's
apologies.
okay. No problem. So yes, you're correct. We need to do a better job because 58%, approving 58% is not working. But I will tell you, behind that we have community pushback. So while we do want to have higher and denser, we get a lot of community pushback, a lot. The community pushback also delays the projects for the developers. That costs them money and time to the point where they're not able to build anymore because they missed out on opportunities for grants, FEMA funding and things like that. So that is a problem. We have 3 large development areas. That's Pantops, it's 29 North, and it's 5th Street extended. So those are the areas where we need, I believe we need to concentrate, go higher and denser so that we don't have to go out into the rural areas. Now, I'm not being naive. I know that eventually, and when I eventually, maybe it's in 15, 20, 25, 50 years, 100 years. I don't know. We will have to start going out into some of the rural areas. But what we're doing with our comprehensive plan now is we're saying, okay, if we were to do this, what would it look like? What are the types of, what areas what do we want there to be? We want there to be easy access to infrastructure, sewer, water, transportation. That would be a criteria probably for moving out into the rural areas. So it is a big problem. We are working on it. And I think this going forward, we're going to do higher and denser. We do have open spaces or open areas like Fashion Square Mall, but that's the owners. They have to be willing to sell to us or have to be willing to develop it. We can't make them develop it. One of the rules that Virginia state law has property rights. So if we cannot make them do it, and the Constitution, and the Constitution too. So thank you.
All right, my apologies. But we'll move into the candidate round where each candidate will have 1 minute to ask another candidate on stage a question. And then that candidate will have 2 minutes to respond. I tell you what, let's start with Bill LaPisto-Kirtley. Who would you like to ask a question?
Should have not said anything. Yes, my question is Mr. Fadeley. He has been saying in the forums that we've been attending and such that he wants to cut the taxes. Okay, so we all know that our tax rate has remained stable for 5 years. But the assessments have gone up, and that's something we don't control. That's by Virginia code that we have to charge fair market value. But he's saying that the taxes need to be cut. Okay, that's his opinion. But I would like to ask him if you cut taxes, because 57% of our monies go for the schools, 15% goes for public health and safety, fire, police, etc. Everything else is in the single digits, all the other services that are provided to the community. But I would like to ask Mr. Fadeley, what services, police, fire, schools, teachers, that he would plan on cutting?
Thank you for that question, B. So it would be none of the above, because those are all of the most, what every taxpayer looks to fund are the common paid goods that we look for: good education, safe communities. So none of those. Where I would look to cut spending would be the 445% increase in 3 years on community development. That's just shy of $30 million. The $1.2 million increase to human resources. All of that is money that can go to prioritize first responders and hiring more police, which on average you'll have maybe 10 for a 700 square mile county, which seems like a very inadequate number. So it would be none of those. As I said, I would look to find ways to make the government more efficient. I'm sure that school budget also has some efficiencies that could be pushed in there as well. A lot of those capital improvement projects that Mike was talking about, to push back the rebuttal there, I would not look to cut from the schools to make better schools or better paid educators. I would look to push back and remove some of the bloated administrative staff. Things like renaming schools that took county taxpayers' dollars that could have been directed to capital improvement projects, or some of the surplus fund or balanced budget fund, as I've heard it called. That's a great place to reach in. And if we're not going to give it back to county taxpayers, we could definitely give it to first responders, educators in the school system that is inadequately funded at best with 50% of the county's budget. So those would be the places I would look. I've heard y'all talk about better services. Now, when I call somebody and say, hey, I'm TJ Fadeley, I'm a candidate for the Board of Supervisors, I get a call back in a couple hours. When I called them and said, hey, I'm TJ Fadeley, I live off of Watts Passage, you might get a call back or you might not. Most of the time I didn't get a call back. So unless you have a decent title behind your name, the odds are those services aren't much better with the increase in budget.
Okay, Supervisor Mallek, you can ask one candidate a question.
I would like to ask Ms. LaPisto-Kirtley what she's most proud of in her first term.
Thank you. It's been a wonderful almost 4 years. The things I'm most proud of, I know Stony Point Volunteer Fire Department received an ambulance for the very first time in its history. An ambulance also went to the East Ravenna station. So that is something, and we're in the process of being able to train the volunteers to be able to use the ambulance. Right now, it's only for career staff. So the ambulance is there, and I almost think that the ambulance is just as important, maybe even more important than a fire truck, because you have a school nearby and you want to be able to protect the children. And there are accidents on Route 20. Yes, people do speed. Another thing that I'm very proud of is being able to close Free Bridge Lane. The supervisors, we all voted to close Free Bridge Lane, small area for speeding cars. That way, and make that part of Darden Town. We're also Biscuit Run, which is the state gave us the acreage for, is in partnership with us for Biscuit Run. We're increasing our parks. We're at Darden Town, we're also redoing the soccer fields. Those soccer fields haven't been redone in 25 years. We're redoing the soccer fields with natural grass. So we're very proud of doing that also. We're starting a Parks Foundation. This would be a group of people that raise money, private money, a non-profit for amenities for parks and recreation. We're working on photo speed cameras. That way it saves police time, and it saves them probably their lives in some rural areas where they cannot safely pull over a car or a speeding truck. Speeding is a big problem, and that would be for that would be for throughout the county, but that's a legislative issue that we're continuing to work on. Thank you.
Okay, TJ Fadeley, one question for one candidate.
So I didn't have a question prepared, although I did get your email, Neil, so I apologize. So shooting off the hip, I would ask a question about economic development in the recently increased transiency occupancy tax to B. Would you allow the county to, or would there be any way you could see the use of more of that tax that has just recently been elevated for a larger investment in advertising and resources to drive revenue for the tourism and hospitality industries in our community that would strongly benefit economic growth in the community?
Thank you. I am on the Visitors Bureau. So yes, we do. Some of those monies are provided. The top transit occupancy tax, which is a hotel tax, the meals tax, we increased that on the board to match Charlottesville. So yes, some of those dollars are used for our Visitors Bureau. Because we bring in a lot of visitors. They go to our wineries. We advertise that. They go to our restaurants, our excellent restaurants, our local restaurants, our rivers, our kayaking along the Ravenna River. All those entities that provide services for our constituents. That's what we're doing with those monies, with the taxes. And by the way, the taxes, the state gave us the opportunity. The state gave us the opportunity a couple of years ago to be able to increase the hotel tax the meals tax, we had the plastic bag tax, and we increased the cigarette tax. Those are things that what I call being creative and being able to make sure that we get extra revenue without having to raise our property taxes. So that was something that was very important to all of us. But yes, our Visitors Bureau, they're bringing in millions, hundreds of millions of dollars into our community because people want to come and visit here. We have a beautiful history. We want to keep it that way, and beautiful rural areas also. Thank you. Thank you for that question.
And finally, Mike Pruitt, one question for one candidate.
I do want to, before my question, very quickly clarify. Our school capital improvement plan is structured through a debt finance expenditure. That means it is tethered to our revenues. It is not tethered to our expenses. We cannot exceed more than 10% of our revenue in debt financing. There is no way you can cut expenses that gets around not building these schools. And if you think so, then you are misunderstanding how the expense is structured. That being said, I'm a young guy and I have never served in local government. I think that's a vital voice to bring, but I also recognize that experience is tremendously important. And I would like to ask my question to Supervisor Mallek. You have served a significant time on this board and you have a wealth of experience that folks like me can learn from. I would love to hear what you are most proud of that you've accomplished in your service.
Certainly worked on many different projects, but the one project which began before I even became a board member was developing support amongst the agriculture community to establish a requalification project, which the county now calls revalidation, in order to make sure that our property tax deferral for properties in agriculture and forestry, otherwise known as the land use program, is actually run perfectly, cleanly, and accurately, so that only those properties which qualify due to their productive nature, raising grain, raising some product for sale, or growing trees for forestry, paper, and also open and all of the ecosystem services which open land provides. Having that, building support for that amongst the community, and then when I was on the board in 2010, having it finally be adopted by the board at the time, was something which I think is incredibly important to protect the livelihoods of the many, many small farmers in our rural areas who also carry on their family legacy on their properties and also provide beautiful open space and scenery for the rest of the visitors and residents to enjoy. Back in the early 2000s, the argument was, my cows don't go to school. And therefore, that was a good reason why the land on which the cows graze or on which the hay is raised for the cows in the wintertime should not be assessed as future housing, but actually assessed on its agricultural merits. Fortunately, we rely on a state program, the SLAC program, which establishes the values and establishes the ground rules. But it is very important that people understand this should not be changed back to permit non-productive land to be qualified to stay in the program. And sadly, that is what my opponent is in favor of doing. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move to our fourth and final portion of this event. I want to thank our candidates. You really worry when you give the candidates the mic and say, ask whatever question you want. It's a little dangerous, but I do enjoy the fact that this is the one time every couple of years that I get to tell these guys when their time is up, rather than having the red light go on for me. We're now to the portion called closing statements. And I want to first offer the closing statement up to Supervisor Ann Mallek.
Thank you very much. No time to even scribble on my notes here. When I began in 2008, the most important thing I learned from participating in local government in other places was how important reaching out to voters and constituents, even the people who did not vote for me, during town halls every spring and every fall was important for my understanding of what they had as their primary concerns, and also allowing me to share the latest news that I was able to provide on different issues. All those years, the primary response has been speeding issues. Far outweighs any other questions about potholes or other services that need repair. There are plenty of different categories which require attention, but those having that contact with citizens has been incredibly helpful to me, and I hope that it has been helpful for them as well. A couple of notes I made to refer to. The career and technical education, just wanted to update that the state actually has a full court press on increasing the availability of apprenticeships to our high school and community college students in order to quickly upskill many of our young people, and also have those available to adult residents as well. The expansion of the development area is something that has come up in our discussion about the comprehensive plan, and I do encourage everyone to use their voice and share what their concerns are. But what I have heard from people in the Whitehall district has been that would dilute even further the area on which infrastructure still needs to be provided. And therefore, it's important that we solve the problems we have now in our existing growth areas, providing sidewalks, et cetera, and then consider only then whether we can do something bigger. The Crossroads Communities is another situation, and I have to stop. But anyway, please participate in the comp plan. Thank you very much. And thank you for having us. And I hope you all will vote on November 7th.
Mr. Fadeley.
So before I start my closing statement, I want to give first and foremost, Mike, I truly look forward to the opportunity to serve. I believe the back and forth between you and I will create a good balance on coming up with amicable solutions that I think we can meet in the middle of the road and agree on. To push back as a businessman, I know debt service, and I understand how maintaining reasonable expenses is always beneficial towards those debt services. As my business has debt we have to service, and expenses and keeping those expenses controlled is one of the main things we look at on a monthly basis. But to start my closing remarks, I want to thank everybody again for the opportunity to be here this evening. I know I'm a political newcomer and I don't have the knowledge of a 16-year or 4-year vet, but neither did they when they started out as well. I am a fast learner and I'm open-minded to working on new solutions to current and future county issues. I'm a citizen legislator and not a career politician. I have fresh eyes that aren't jaded. Between increased taxes and inflation, people are struggling. This I know personally. All while the county is recording regular annual surpluses or budget balance funds. I vow to support county spending that will allow taxpayers to keep more of their income or support returning excess surpluses. I will work to encourage efficient and transparent government, to do more with less, and be the eyes and ears to inform residents how our money is being spent. Encouraging diverse programs for economic development and growth by making sure police, first responders, teachers are always top priority at maintaining a safe community. And if you plan to vote early, you can do it now at the county office building on 5th Street, where I hope to earn your vote and bring a new voice to the Board of Supervisors for the Rivanna District. If you have any concerns and you want to share them or want to support my campaign, please check out my website at everybodybotestj.com. Again, that is everybodybotestj.com. And again, I want to thank the Free Enterprise Forum and NBC 29 for the invitation to participate tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Pruitt.
Thank you so much. I want to use my closing statement to actually grind a minor axe I have. We hear a lot, especially with local elections and sometimes state elections, that these aren't really partisan. These aren't really politically. They're really about good governance and community service. And they are about good governance and community service. And I've made a serious effort at making sure I'm listening to as many different voices in my community as I can. But I want to be clear, I do believe they are also deeply political, because the problems that we face are deeply rooted in politics. About every week in this county, nearly 24 folks are processed for evictions from their home. These are working folks. These aren't people who are unemployed. We have every day me driving past Mountain View and watching kids in an affluent county who are having to learn in trailers. And we have, a climate that we can see rising temperatures or erratic temperatures. We can see more ticks every season. And we know it's serious. We have the marks on the walls of downtown Scottsville to remind us of how serious the threat of climate and the importance of climate resilience. These are all political questions. We need 3 new schools. And to do that, we need to be firm in our commitment to our current tax rate. And that is a political question. We need a robust housing trust fund. And that means we need a board that is really committed to a serious generational investment in that. And that is a political question. And we need LGBT kids like I once was to be able to feel safe in our schools. And that is a fundamentally political question. And we need our children to know what it feels like to feel the shade of cool trees and the taste of clean water. And that is a political question. These are all political questions because our lives are political things. And we don't always get to control how our lives become political things, but we can control what we do with that energy. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Supervisor LaPisto-Kirtley, your closing statement.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for having us, both to Steve and Neil, and for everyone that showed up today. I deeply appreciate it. Government exists to provide services to the people who live here. We all pay our taxes and you get services in return. You call and you get a response. You call me and you always get a response to your call or to your email. I listen to people. I find out what the community wants. The closing of Freebridge Lane, that was from the Pantops master plan. That's something that the community wanted. And as supervisors, we were able to provide that. We're in a very diverse county. We have agriculture, we have urban, we have rural, we have small businesses, we have large businesses. We're investing in our future for Rivanna Station Futures. That's going to be a huge development that will, I think, help pay for itself with the federal and state governments working with us, and for the research that's going to happen there, the bio research, the defense industry that is there already, so we can expand. It's a national security issue also. I am in contact with my constituents. They want a safe, secure place to live. They want parks. They want to be able to have good schools. I think we provide all of that, or we're working on providing all of that. You need an excellent educational system in order to thrive. And I think that that's what we're all working toward. I'm proud of the things that this board has been able to do, working together. You have to have people that work together. If you don't have people that work together, you're not going to get anything done. We've had boards before where there was an outlier, couldn't get anything done. You need people that compromise. They come together and they compromise. And I have the leadership and the experience to be able to do that, to be able to continue doing that. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you to everybody who came out, and to the 4 candidates. Certainly Neil and I, when we spoke in the last couple of weeks, everyone may not agree on everything, but no question that everyone up here wants what they think is best for Albemarle County. And that's certainly to be commended. Thank you again for coming out. Thank you for participating. And even with cameras on some of the traffic lights, drive safely and getting home.